What's up YouTube, Kronos here, and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So before we jump into this, I'm sure you guys have noticed that there have been more videos over the course of the past couple of days. I'm trying this new thing where I try to get a bit more content out on a regular basis, see how channel growth kind of works out. And so far you guys have been killing it. So likes, comments, all been awesome. Like the videos, that's the sort of thing that you like. And I hate the shill moments of these, but yeah, subscribe if you want to keep up with the content as it releases. But without further ado, let's go ahead and kind of jump into this video. So the point of this entire video is kind of to talk about my roadmap as I started the game and as I'm moving forward through to the end game and looking in the future of what's to come in PSO2. Now, granted, this is going to be about the North American servers. That's what I'm primarily playing these days. I still play a little bit on the JP servers as well, but my primary focus is on North America because that's where I mean, technically I really don't need the most work on my North American account. Technically I need more on my JP account, but I'm just having the most fun with playing with my friends on the NA servers. So super fun. But I know I've gotten a lot of questions about people asking, what should I be farming? How do I pick up certain things? What should I be doing when it comes to weapons? And one of the things that I also struggled with as a player when I first started was just upgrading weapons, right? I always had this mindset from playing previous MMOs is that I'm swapping out my weapons all the time, right? Like I'm getting a new weapon, should I be upgrading this weapon? Should I add anything to it? So on and so forth. And the game doesn't do the greatest job of explaining whether or not you should be doing this. And to answer your question at the very beginning, basically no. This is going to go a little bit into how you should be looting in PSO2, but in reality, what I did personally was just used whatever weapon I happened to find lying on the ground that was better than what I had previously. If that means that the augments push it over the other weapon a little bit, then sure, I would just go ahead and see. It's like, oh, well, I have a 1-star weapon right now. There's a 3-star weapon on the ground. I'll pick it up, take a look at it and try equipping it, see if it's going to be stronger than what I have. It is cool. I'm using it. It's not awesome. I'm trashing it. And that was the only thought process that I would have as far as weapons went. Wouldn't worry about upgrading them, just kind of went through the process itself. Now, this more or less continued all the way until around this area here. Primarily until I reached Sigma weapons. Now, this is kind of something specific to bouncers and to bravers. Because our mags are dexterity mags, and I know I mentioned this in a previous video about the Sigma weapons, but because our mags are dexterity based mags, we have the option of equipping these weapons fairly easily and fairly early on. Now, you don't stack dex. That's not something that you're doing as a class. I know people have asked this beforehand, like, do I stack dexterity as a bouncer? No. Because bouncers have a skill on their tree that allows them to take the dexterity on their mag, specifically only from their mag, and apply it directly to their melee power and their tech power. Meaning that if you have a 200 dexterity mag and you're playing bouncer, in reality what you're getting from that mag is 200 dexterity, 200 melee power, and 200 technique power. So you're getting a total of 600 points going into it. That is the only reason that you use dexterity. That is it. No other reason whatsoever. Outside of that, on your skill tree, you're not putting points in the dexterity other than to get to skills that you need to get to. And that's the whole process. So hopefully that clears up that question, because I get that question a lot. And I feel like I've kind of made this point beforehand, but maybe I just didn't hammer it home enough. So we have the benefit of these Sigma weapons. Now, Sigma weapons are all class weapons, meaning that when I was leveling Bouncer Hunter, because you should be playing Bouncer Hunter if you're playing Bouncer, when I was leveling Bouncer Hunter, I could invest into this weapon, and I upgraded it, grinded it all the way up to plus 35. Actually, I think I just grinded it at plus 30. I might have put it at plus 35 because it was super cheap to do so and I had the money, but basically up to plus 30. Made sure it had max element, and I just used this one weapon. That was it. I was just continuously using this one weapon as I was leveling up Bouncer. And then when I switched to Hunter as my main class, I could also continue to use the same weapon with the same tree because it was pretty much the same setup. So that was the benefit to doing that. Bouncer can do this, and so can Braver fairly easily. There may be other classes that can kind of get away with this here and there, but this is primarily the reason why I went through this. And some of my friends have actually been making dexterity mags because they're going to be leveling up other classes anyway that use a dexterity mag, and they can use this little trick to use the Sigma weapons. So something to keep in mind. So that was my first investment as far as weapons went. Afterwards, we moved over to these two weapons here. Now, something good to keep in mind is always check out the wikis and check out the potentials of certain weapons. Now, you guys can see there's a ton of weapons here, but they show you exactly what all these weapons do. And one thing that some people don't realize if they're playing Bouncer is the twin Orochis are actually extremely powerful for Bouncer, specifically for break stance. It increases your damage by 60%. And to give you guys an idea of how strong that actually is, I have a set of twin Orochis on my character. Actually, you know what? I actually have the character right here. I have a set of these twin Orochis that I did a little light affix on them. They're plus 35. I have 130 melee power. You can see that compared to my current slave dual blades, it is 600 less melee power. 626 less melee power. On a breakable part, these twin Orochis will outdamage my slave dual blades. That's how strong that buff actually is. If you're using if you're on a breakable part, because of break stance's damage bonus over elemental stance, you will actually end up doing more damage with the twin Orochis than you will with the other weapons. So when I got to this point, I remember that from playing the JP servers, I made a pair of twin Orochis for myself. Just ground them up. I didn't worry about affixing them or anything like that. Just did the whole grinding process, got them leveled up, made sure they were max element, and I had a weapon for whenever I was dealing with a breakable part. That means things like Elder Arms, Luther's Arms, Luther's Crown, his beak, even the clock. All those parts, when they're breakable, I'm dealing more damage with break stance in this weapon. So, good weapon to have on the side. Now, I ended up swapping out the Sigma weapon for making 3 of these Nox weapons here. Now, this is kind of where I would go to if you're in this situation, you can't use Sigma weapons, just jump directly to Nox. Now, granted, you may be stuck holding on to one of your older weapons for a little while longer because Nox weapons have this defense requirement. They change between classes, of course. Some require range defense, some require tech defense, but it's a defense stat that's required for this. Now, what I usually consider Nox weapons are stat sticks and leveling fodder. So what I had was something that I could level up. Now, granted, I took my Sigma weapon, I turned around and sold it because people were buying them. And I sold it for about 3 to 4 mil, I believe, because it was plus 30. At the time, that's plus 30 weapons are really good for selling as fodder to level up other weapons. It's kind of the meta way to level a 13-star weapon, which I'll talk about very briefly on how you actually do that process itself, because it fits into why I picked up these Nox weapons. So if you played on the JP servers, you probably remember that Nox weapons were kind of like your bread and butter, super kind of like intro weapon when you kind of got to higher star weapons that you could just make and use for a little while. Now, I made 3 of these primarily because of their potential. It boosts the effect of elemental stance. So if I was attacking a non-breakable part, I used my elemental weapon. I kept like I think it was light, fire and lightning at the time for the bosses that we were dealing with mostly. So I kept those 3 weapons on me at plus 35 or plus 30. It did take a couple of copies of them. I just kind of checked the market out when things were relatively inexpensive and then just snatched a few of them up here and there. But basically I built into 3 of these, upgraded them, and I had this weapon here. Now I sat on these weapons for a while until I could get onto these Milo Brights. Now, because I started in the beta, at the time, the Milo Brights, the Blade Revulsios, the Aura, and the Titan Blazers, these were the only weapons that were available as 13 stars. There were no Ray Soaring Blades, there were no Mars weapons, no Gix, no Nemesis. None of that was here. This was added later on. So my end game was pretty much looking at these Milo Brights. Now, granted, they are weaker than Titan Blazer, but in a previous video we went over this, I didn't touch either one of these weapons because they were super duper expensive and I could make more money off of them. And they have no future. These weapons don't go anywhere. They don't upgrade into anything. They're not used anywhere else. Their best use, honestly, is as like Doombreak fodder, and even in that situation, it's not that great at it. So what I looked at were these Milo Brights. I was able to get unique weapon badges for them, and I saved up enough to get, I think, about 2 of them, and I bought the 3rd off of the market because these are sellable weapons. So keep in mind that you are making an investment when it comes down to money, because you need 3 of these weapons total. Now, why 3? They come at a base 20%. Some people were using unique weapon badges. They were buying these and then they were selling them on the market. These were selling for about 2 mil-ish roughly when I bought them. So they were pretty cheap. But they were useful. And first thought is, well, 13 stars is gonna be better than 12 star. Why not just jump into it as soon as you can get one? Well, if you actually look at the base power here versus the upgraded power here, the Nox weapons were better while they were upgraded. Now you could upgrade a Milo Bright, but there are 2 important things to keep in mind. 1, 13 stars require lambda grinders. So the optimal way to level up a Milo Bright or level up 13 stars in general is to grind 12 stars to plus 26 to 30, depending upon the grind that you're going for. And then grind those weapons into Milo Brights or into your chosen 13 star, 14 star, 15 star weapon. See, now the fact that I had 3 Nox weapons makes a bit more sense. I specifically chose 3 because I knew I would need at least 3 to get my Milo Brights to plus 30. So had these 3 weapons, invested in them and used them for damage. That way I could actually deal some decent damage. To be honest, these 2 weapons here could carry me for quite some time. If I was in the shoes of most PC players right now, I would stick around Nox weapons until I got to the section here. Because to be perfectly honest, this jump is still an investment that's going to cost you money. And though, yes, they are useful, you really don't need them to clear content. If more people realized how strong Nox weapons were and actually upgraded their weapons and just used them as just straight up stat sticks, because not all of them have great potentials. Some of them have really, really crappy ones. But if just use them as straight stat sticks and focus more on their actual gameplay, they deal a decent amount of damage. They actually do okay. And with 12 people doing enough of that, you kill it. You actually take down content. So it's pretty surprising how much this is overlooked with people not upgrading their weapons, right? Because they think 13 star, I got to get this next, right? This is the next best weapon. Reality, they're losing damage. So we got 3 of these. We waited till we had 3 Milo Brights. I tossed the 3 Nox weapons into my Milo Bright, the first one, and then 2 more to get that up to plus 60 element. That got me up to max on the potential, which is a plus 3 potential, which gets that moving forward, and then maxed on the actual, or not maxed, I'm sorry, but we got maxed on the element and maxed on the potential. Those are the 2 most important things, because that's going to attribute to your damage. And I got pretty close to this number here. It wasn't exactly 1456. It was below it because we were plus 32. To get it to plus 35, we would need 3 more copies. And that's an investment of at least 6 mil, if not a bit more. And I wasn't really prepared to do that on this weapon when I knew it was going to get outclassed and didn't really have much of a future outside of being used as basically a stat stick for myself for now. Its potential is pretty solid. It had 12% increased damage and 30% while attacking in the air. For Soaring Blades, it's pretty good because most of your attacks are going to be in the air anyway, and some even on the ground are considered in the air attacks. So really good. So we sat with these. Granted, I'd skip this step personally now, but this was okay for us because we didn't have those other weapons at the time. Then we're moving down into Soaring Blades, the Ray Soaring Blades, which granted, I mentioned these were actually a pretty solid weapon, and they're okay. Because of the Union upgrade. However, you have to use rising weapon badges for them. I don't know that they dropped from Ultimate Quests yet. And there are better uses for rising weapon badge 2s. So, which I'm going to go to in the actual units video. I'm going to talk about that as well. But, so we skip this. We're taking a look at these 3 weapons here. So this is actually the reason for making this video in the first place. I had a situation, or in the comments, people have mentioned, well, hey, you know, Colonel, I've got I have a Gix weapon. It does decent damage, and I just have to change up my playstyle to fit what its potential does. To be perfectly honest, that's not incorrect. Gix weapons are great weapons to an extent. It depends on what you're dealing with. The biggest problem for Gix weapons is they tend to fight the absolute way of dealing, or the absolute, what's what I'm looking for? The common way that people are dealing with defenses in the game at the moment. And so for the Soaring Blade specifically, you're looking at the potential, whenever you take damage, it resets the power. The power is between 6 and 20%. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a perfect player, so I'm going to take damage. In some situations, as a bouncer, you'll be in the middle of a PA that you really don't want to cut because you're dealing damage, and you can survive that hit. But with this Gix weapon, you don't have that choice. You're going to lose damage if you take damage. So you want to dodge, meaning you lost damage on your PA. And it takes 50 seconds to get it to max. And this changes based on the weapon. I would highly recommend checking your weapon type, seeing what this does, and kind of figuring out, well, is that going to cause me problems as I'm dealing with stuff? For situations like someone playing, say, Hunter Fighter, I know the way that one specifically works is if you heal with a mate item, you lose the reset, which is terrible because most situations, in most cases, hunters are using automate. Now, granted, if you're one of those hunters that are using the, the guard stance tree, and you're able to play it without automate because you're just using guard stance with Iron Will Stalwart Spirit, and you're able to heal yourself up without using mates, and that works out fine. Yes, that for your playstyle, that works great, but most people aren't playing that way because, to be perfectly honest, they're just not that great at parrying everything. So that's not going to work for them. That's why I said the Gix weapons aren't that great to use. They have their place and they can be useful, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be better than something that really isn't that much more expensive in most cases. So it brings us down to Nemesis and Slave weapons. Now, this is the second reason for making this video, and this is probably going to be the longest part. So I apologize in advance. I know this video is going to be long. I actually tried recording this earlier and it was 26 minutes. So I'm going to try to shorten that down a bit for us. So we have Nemesis and Slave weapons. So from playing on the JP servers, and this requires a little bit of a history lesson, we had a different type of grinding that existed on JP. I'll show you guys really quick here. These two weapons. You see one of them is just a dual blade and the other one is a dual blade NT. Previously on JP servers, we had the grinding system similar to units. If you're familiar with how units work, you would grind up the unit and it would be an RNG based chance for it to fail the grind. So you would just grind units up, you would grind weapons up, and eventually sometimes they'd fail, they'd succeed. When you got them to +10, you would unlock their potential and it would reset the grinds back down to 0. You would then grind them back up again to 10, reset potential, they would reset back down, grind up again, unlock third potential. I believe the third potential they would reset down again. Someone can correct me in the comments. I'm not 100% sure because it's been a long time since I've done an old type grind on a weapon on the JP servers. So you'd probably have to grind it up again after that to then get it maximum grinds. Well, going into, I believe, episode 4, I want to say either episode 3 or episode 4. It might have been in episode 3. They changed the grinding system where you would actually grind weapons into your current weapon, or you would feed them into your current weapon as fodder, which you guys are used to hearing from me talking about other weapons, the 13 stars from earlier, and they would get a fixed amount of experience. That experience bar would go up, and as you level up the weapon, when it got to level 10, it would unlock the first potential, level 20, second potential, level 30, third potential. So you'd have these new type weapons that had a different setup. Now, why do we talk about this? Well, because North America doesn't have new type weapons. They just have weapons and they all work like the new type weapons on Japan. See how we have Nox NTs, we have like all these NTs, right? That just means it has the new type grinding system. As you can see, the Slave and Nemesis weapons exist as regular types of weapons. Notice that their stats are substantially lower than our NA counterparts. Well, that's because they released a new type version of these weapons. And we already have the new type version in the place that normally we would have gotten the regular version. So beforehand, we would usually have gotten the regular type version of the weapon. We got the new type version of it. Why is this important? Well, because these were actually a step process. These were a part of upgrading into... Oh, I think I might have passed it. And where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? My eyes are terrible. There it is. These are part of the process of upgrading into a 15-star weapon. This is what I mean by weapons with future. Some weapons are part of a step process that upgrade into other weapons you can use later. Now, granted, when this weapon came out, this austere NT weapon came out, and I'm sure some of other people who have played at the time are going to mention, it wasn't the strongest of the 15 stars. Actually, technically speaking, in most cases, it was the weakest of the 3. Your options were the austere NTs, the Atlas EXs, or the light streams. The biggest portion here was that these were accessible fairly quickly if you already had the items to actually create them. And you didn't really need to grind many of the items. They were all available in the game before these actually came out. So in most cases, people had these weapons, if not on the first day that they released, fairly quickly after they released. The Atlas weapons required a little bit of grinding. I don't remember exactly what was necessary for them, but they were relatively easy to get a hold of if you had the base Atlas weapon, which was right here. But the Lightstream weapon, the one that you really sought after, required 50 kills of an urgent quest boss you could only do one time every time you popped up. So that usually took some time. Now, granted, you could multi-ship. You could do basically you could do the fight on, say, ship 2 and then switch to a character on ship 1 and do it again on ship 1 to get 2 kills, making it twice as fast. Or if you have a character on all 3 ships, you could make it 3 times as fast. However, there was still a grind that was necessary for getting these weapons. And in most cases, for a lot of classes in the game, you really do want multiple weapons, especially for Bouncer, where in reality, to play the class absolutely optimally, you really do want weapons of multiple elements for your Soaring Blades, and their jet boots, of course, can element change on their own. Because element changing isn't exactly the easiest thing to do. The one weapon that can do that actually is the Atlas weapons, and they switch to the element that is equipped by your guard skill ring, which doesn't cover every single element if I remember correctly, and it's a little bit wonky and also eats up your right slot ring. It does increase its damage by having the proper element, but you'd lose damage by losing your right slot ring, and then you lose utility. And it's very wonky, and I kind of hate it personally. So I usually don't even bother using this S4. I actually use a healing S4 on this weapon, but we can go into that, and that's a different video. But the point is the weapons have a future. They have something to work into later on down the line. That's why I keep these in mind when I'm moving forward, and why I have this kind of roadmap in mind. Are these weapons going to be the best weapon continuously? No, they're not. These weapons will get outclassed by 14 stars. 14 stars like the Jupiter Tullus, like the Reaver Garola, or Garola, however you pronounce it. I'm terrible at pronouncing words, but they'll get outclassed by these weapons for a while. And when that happens and I get these to drop, I'm just going to toss these in my storage, and I'm going to hold on to them until the 15 star comes out, and then I have part of the process of what I need to get my new weapons. It allows you to not only right now use the weapons and be relatively powerful. Actually, they're the strongest weapons in the game on the North American servers right now. So it allows us to have the best in slot weapon choice for now, but it also has use later. That won't always be the case. Notice how I personally skipped the best in slot weapon during just the Xbox use because I knew they didn't do anything, and stuck with something slightly below because I didn't want to expend that extra money. And then when something came out that was best in slot and then also useful in the future, we jumped towards that. That's what I mean by keeping in mind what you can use moving forward. Now, granted, not everyone knows what these weapons are going to be, what's going to be useful moving forward, and all that sort of stuff. And in those cases, I highly suggest checking out guides. The PSO2 Fleet Discord, I'm going to toss a link to that channel. I mean, granted, if you're using the tweaker, there's a link to the Discord there. You can also just Google PSO2 Fleet Discord. You'll find a link to the Discord that way. I mean, there's tons of ways to get a hold of it, but they have guides. They have a guide channel that explains weapons for classes moving forward, new things. Remember I mentioned the Jupiter Tullus and the Reaver Garolas? They're right here, and they explain these weapons and why they're actually fairly good. They explain things like the austere weapons, the Atlas weapons, the Lightstream weapons, later weapons that we're going to be moving into, and how useful they're going to be versus how useful they won't be. These are things you can look at if you're like, hey, I don't really know how useful these weapons actually are. You know, I don't know what I'm going to use these for. Things like the novel weapons, which, to be honest, when they first released, weren't super fantastic, but they upgraded into some of the best weapons in the game shortly afterwards. So you better believe when the novel weapons come out, I'm going to get one. I'm going to make it and upgrade it into something decent because I know it's going to upgrade into these Liberate weapons. It's just something to keep in mind while you're moving forward. And a lot of this stuff is readily available. I mean, granted, sometimes it's not the easiest information to find, but you can check on the PSO2 Fleet Discord. You can check the guides. You can ask in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. Maybe other commenters who know about this sort of thing may answer them for you. Or if you started playing with a couple of buddies that played on the JP servers, ask them. They may remember this stuff. This honestly, part of what turned me off mostly in some cases of playing on JP was I had the thought process of upgrading, and I'd make all these upgrades and I'd work in all these weapons, and then in reality, they were just wasted. I personally made 5 of these Series 0 weapons because I played dual blades only or soaring blades only on Japanese servers, and then a new weapon came out, and even off element, the new weapon was doing more damage than these were doing. So 5 of the weapons that I spent probably about a week grinding mercilessly to make sure that I was able to get a hold of them before they disappeared were completely useless. Now, granted, are they easy to get a hold of? They were if you'd been playing at the time. But had I known something was coming out that was going to be better than them so quickly, and I knew these weapons didn't really have much of a life past this, I wouldn't have ground so hard into getting a hold of them. So hopefully this helps you guys out. I highly recommend checking out the JP side of this wiki as well. If you are someone who's checked out the NA wiki, you can just click on the Vision Fund right here and go over to the JP wiki. You can see some of the stuff that that might be coming around and how useful it may be. Always check out potentials, check out powers and things of that sort. And you can see kind of what you're working towards. So I plan on making a counterpart to this video when it comes to units. Units are going to be a very different conversation. Ultimately, I know I talked about this, I think a very little amount with the Ray units. I might have mentioned it, I can't remember 100%. But units kind of have they're a different beast that aren't as crazy jumps, and they're actually were probably my biggest problem with upgrades were units. I think I spent the most amount of money on unit upgrades that were completely unnecessary. Anyway, guys, if you guys have any questions, feel free to toss them in the comments below. The point of these videos, and I wanted to make sure to toss this in here, I probably should have made a disclaimer at the very beginning of the video itself, but the point of these videos are to be thought-provoking, to provide information to you guys based on my own experiences, and then you take that information and apply it to what you're currently dealing with at the moment. Granted, it may not always apply directly to you. You may not be playing Bouncer. Maybe you're playing a different class that uses a different weapon that's fairly useful. In some cases, slave weapons are better than nemesis weapons. In most cases, nemesis weapons are better than slave weapons. It depends on the class. The whole point, guys, is to take this information and apply it to what you have. If you happen to find something that works better for you, that's working different, I don't shy that away. By all means, I encourage you, comment that or enter those in the comments below. We can have those conversations where maybe you figured out something that I haven't, and then together as players, we can grow moving forward to make the game more fun. Because the most unfun portion of PSO2, I have to say, is getting weapons and getting upgrades and then realizing shortly after that they're completely outclassed. And it's also not fun hearing someone say all the time, well, don't bother doing that because it's not worth it. You know, you want to upgrade, you want to get stronger, right? That makes things more fun. But you want to be careful about how you do it in some cases. Anyway, I could ramble on about this forever. I don't want to do that, but toss a like if this is the type of video you like. Of course, subscribe if you want to keep up with more videos. I'm going to be trying to get more of these out as soon as possible, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care. Be safe.